Welcome back to the Men We Are podcast. This is episode 2 in the series, and today we're going to start looking at our first topic, which is missing out or just outgrowing. So there's a feeling I hear a lot from men, and I certainly feel it myself, but we don't always name it properly. It sometimes shows up as restlessness, as scrolling a bit too long, maybe like a quiet sadness that arrives with no clear or obvious reason. And I think it's this sense that life is happening somewhere else, perhaps that it's passing you by or it's already passed you by, and you somehow ended up with a bad deal, and that you're missing out on life. And you always hear people saying, I'm just waiting for life to get going, I'm waiting for my life to start. And for a long time, I thought that feeling that meant something was wrong, that I'd made the wrong choices, that I'd somehow ended up on the wrong version of my own life. But lately I've been wondering if that feeling isn't always about loss at all, or at least maybe loss is just the wrong word. What if some of what we call missing out is actually just outgrowing things? So perhaps instead of thinking we lost something, it might be better to think we chose to give it away. So on the back of that, there's a phrase that I'm sure plenty of you have heard, and it's fear of missing out, or FOMO. And it gets talked about as if it's a modern problem. I think the reason is because of social media. We seem to get this snapshot of people's lives, the highlights, the holidays, the fitness, the freedom, all the good stuff. And we seem to think that because social media is a relatively new thing, people have only been suffering with that recently. And I'm sure some of those people's lives, what they're showing us, what they're showing the world is real. But we're constantly being shown a life with like fewer constraints than ours, fewer responsibilities, less dependence, and seemingly they're getting nothing but the good stuff. But here's the part we don't tend to say out loud enough, that most of us didn't actually lose those lives, those nice things, those fewer responsibilities, those fewer constraints. We didn't lose it, we chose something else. And we chose responsibility, we chose to commit, we chose to build something instead of keeping everything wide open. So we can no longer really raise a glass merrily chanting something along the lines of here's to having it all, because it's nothing but a fallacy. Yet the feeling will continue to creep in. So you can be doing well, you can love your kids, you can be proud of the life you're building, yet you could still have this strange ache when you see a door that you perhaps didn't walk through, or you see someone doing something that you perhaps could have done in an earlier part of yourself. And for me, that doesn't make you ungrateful, it just makes you human. So with a lot of problems like this, sometimes reframing them can entirely change the perspective, and therefore it's easier to make sense of it. And that comes down to the crux of the issue with men, and why I'm doing this for people in the men's space, is that we are fucking useless at talking about our problems. And because we're useless at talking about them, nobody knows about them, or no one has a clear idea that we're going through something and something is really causing us like issue, consternation. And therefore, if people don't know, they can't tell us their opinion, because you know the way it is. If you tell someone I've got a problem, people love to tell you their opinion and give you a solution. So whether you ask for it or not, you tend to get it. So the nice thing there is that actually if you do talk about things, then other people will give you their viewpoint, their perspective, and hopefully it opposes the negative one that's churning round and round in your brain and constantly at the back of your mind. So if you are struggling with this concept of fear of missing out, perhaps a reframe that helped me is that life narrowing or becoming more focused is not the same as life shrinking. Like when you were younger, everything was wide open. That at the time feels like freedom, like the world is my oyster, I can do anything I want. But it's also that way because nothing really has gained any weight yet. So as life goes on, things start to narrow because they matter more, and that means you can't be everywhere because you're needed somewhere. You can't say yes to everything. If your mates call you up and say, let's go for beers, you can't, because some things have consequences. And the picture that you decided to paint isn't a self-portrait, it's a family picture. So from the outside, that narrowing might look like loss, but actually from the inside, that loss from the inside looks more like depth. So the problem is, and again, back to this being a podcast for men in the men's space, is that no one prepares men for that shift. And it's as if we're kept hooked on the idea that more options always means a better life. So when the options fall away, we assume something has gone wrong. But nothing's gone wrong at all. Sometimes you've just moved into a different phase. And that different phase requires more energy and commitment and focus, but equally, for the effort it takes, it can offer deeper feelings of well-being, more rewards, you'll feel happier. So your total level of happiness hasn't gone down, just it's a bit of a quality, maybe quality over quantity situation. So there are less things going on in your life to make you satisfied, but the things that are there are so much more potent, and therefore they still achieve those levels of satisfaction. I'm trying to think of an analogy. It's maybe like you have the opportunity all day long to have one spoonful of ice cream every hour, and it's kind of like you're getting it more often, but you're getting less of it. So like the quality and even the quantity of the thing that makes you happy, it happens more often, but it's not of the highest quality. Whereas this point that you've moved into now, you get the whole bowl of ice cream, you get it all at once. You have to wait for it. You can't do it whenever you want, but when it comes, it's just awesome. So if you buy into the idea of fear of missing out, I found it helpful to think about it in, I suppose 3 categories. And what that means is fear of missing out isn't all the same. And there are some things that you could confuse, which would cause unnecessary suffering. So the first type of fear of missing out, or FOMO, is imaginary FOMO. And this is the version that's built basically on fantasy. It's the life you imagine other people are living. This uninterrupted, unadulterated, fulfilled, exciting. But what you're not seeing is you're not seeing their comparison of the behind the scenes perspective of your life. You're just getting to see their show reel, their highlight reel, the best bits, the stuff they want the world to see. So the fix here, it's not changing your life. It's just logically sitting back and saying, it's all an illusion. I'm seeing it more clearly because it's not quite true. So the second type of fear of missing out is cultural, but this one does definitely run a bit deeper. And it comes from the story we've been told of you should look to constant progress, upward momentum, never slow down, never settle. And if you're not doing that, then you're failing. So when your life becomes repetitive, domestic, quieter, you assume you failed or perhaps stagnated. But it's hard to say, but what if the culture entirely is wrong here? And I am going out on a limb saying this, but what if steadiness isn't stagnation, but it's a demonstration of consistency? So it's repetition, but you're being consistent about it. Because there's a real fantastic statistic that you don't become an expert in anything until you've done it for 10,000 hours. And in 10,000 hours, the likelihood is you will have gone through substantial repetition over and over and over. And in doing the same things over and over, you'll build an experience. And with experience, your brain doesn't have to work as hard. So you move from the like cognitive phase of learning, where you really have to use your brain, to autonomy, where you can almost do things on autopilot. And the important thing there is, it's not to say you're doing things without effort, but you're freeing up mental capacity. So the more time you invest in these things, actually, the more your brain can switch off to the tasks themselves, which allows you to be more present in those moments, and you're more conscious of the fact you have a higher level of consciousness in each moment. So cultural fear of missing out makes good men feel like they're doing something wrong, when they're often doing something really brave by committing to seeing the task through. And then the final framing, fear of missing out, this is a more difficult one, and I think this one is actually real, and it's earned fear of missing out, or earned FOMO. And this is the one we avoid talking about. This is the fear of missing out that isn't imaginary or cultural. It's the real stuff. It's missing out on firsts. It's missing out on first steps, the first time they eat solid food as your kids. It's missing time with your partner. It's missing moments that don't come back. It's not playing anymore. It's the missing the version of your kids they were 6 months ago. It's missing being more present. It's all of those things. It's a real fear. It's a deep fear, so deep that I think the shift towards genuine sadness, which, I mean, that's the cause. We move towards sadness, which retrospectively is grief. So grief doesn't mean you chose wrong. It means you cared, which is really important. And it's not anything to be ashamed of or upset or disappointed about. So the danger for men, because of the way we are hardwired, the way our brain works, is when we don't allow ourselves to name grief, it doesn't disappear. Instead, what happens is it hardens and it turns into resentment, effectively, which is probably what makes us so much more irritated. We become distant. We have that sense of, this isn't what I signed up for. So if we can allow some of that grief in and we acknowledge its existence, it does have the ability to soften us a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with being softened up a bit. So this takes us back to the reframing, where we can almost self-talk and say, I wish I'd been there more, or I missed that stage, or I feel sad that I didn't get to experience X, Y, and Z. And even though you're saying those things, you're acknowledging, you are quite clearly acknowledging that you are upset, you have grief over the thing. You can still say, and I am proud of the life I am living now, in spite of all of those things. So the two things can coexist, and that's maturity. You're not pretending the sadness isn't there, but you're also not letting it like steer the story, the direction it wants to go. You're taking control, you're taking the initiative. So for me, here's where I kind of land on this, with this fear of missing out. Some of it is imaginary, and it's really not worth your attention. Social media can be a poison at times. It can be awesome. You can learn huge amounts. You can get inspiration, but it can be a real poison, because you're seeing a snapshot of things that might not be quite true. Some of the fear of missing out is cultural, and you don't need it to define you. Just because society says you have to keep climbing and you have to keep improving, and you don't. If you're doing well enough already, you need to just be consistent, because consistency is going to be one of the most important things in staying happy. But some fear of missing out is real. It's definitely real. You have to earn it, and you need to acknowledge it and not avoid it, because if you avoid it, it festers. So missing out doesn't always mean you're failing at life. Sometimes it means you chose something that mattered enough. Unfortunately, it cost you something else. But that's sacrifice. And maturity is the foundation of sacrifice. And that's not a flaw. It's just a trade-off. It's just the reality of becoming a good man. So that raises a more interesting question for me, and one I definitely want to explore next time. And it's, if some things are really worth being sad about, missing, like missing out on, or missing when we think back retrospectively about them, what are we allowed to actually grieve for? So what are we actually allowed to grieve? What losses deserve to be named, especially when it comes to time, maybe how much you were there and how present you were, and the people we love most. So that's the plan. Next time, next episode, that's where we're going to focus on. What are we actually allowed to grieve? So if any of this hit, if any of it felt familiar, I hope you're checking again. Truly hope you'll stick around, and hopefully we'll continue this little journey together.